Trauma Chat with L&L takes the complexity out of trauma and makes it bite-sized.
Our goal is not to minimize it, but to normalize having conversations about the experience that many of us have without always knowing how to cope.
Trauma recovery is possible. Healing from past or even recent hurts is possible.
And we're both trauma therapists, so let's talk about it. I'm LaQuisha Fonrose, therapist, speaker, author, and owner of Holistic Quest Wellness. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and certified EFT practitioner, which stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. I specialize in supporting individuals and communities with discovering the tools, the strategies, and the insights to have better relationships with their thoughts and feelings so that they have more control in their lives.
And I'm Leticia Vaca-Williams, a therapist, speaker, and owner of Urban Health Group, Inc. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, certified in brain spotting, and certified in EMDR, and I'm an experienced medical social worker. Urban Health Group is a boutique-style concierge for healthcare navigation and mental health support. Our ultimate goal is to empower Black, Indigenous people of color with tools and supports to effectively navigate their health and mental health needs for better wellness.
And that's a big one, like a big myth buster that I want to highlight, because you keep saying it around like how we treat ourselves, right? Like how our internal system is operating, how our internal thoughts are being received, how we feel on the inside. Like that's what spills out into the world. And I think a lot of people are expecting it to be the opposite, right? Like how people treat me, then that makes me feel good, which is true.
That's true.
But that's not necessarily where it starts in adulthood.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And it's less reliable. If I'm waiting for people to treat me,
Yes.
I might get a really kind person, right? And sometimes, and I know in my personal life, the kindness of strangers always really throws me for a loop. It's like, wow, that was really sweet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can even expect kindness from a stranger. It
Right.
doesn't even have to be a extensive thing, but once you kind of experience it, you also want to share it. So that's why I'm saying sometimes it's modeled that you can give it, but sometimes you're going to have to embody it when it's not around you because it's a value that, especially when you're in certain environments, it can even be a work environment, right? Where it's very high stress. When I think about like teachers or social workers or healthcare workers or firemen, police officers, folks who are, service people who are
Crisis management, all of those roles, right?
that
Yes.
stuff tends to go out the window. That relational trauma can pop up even in the workplace because of the needs of the community seem much bigger than me just trying to talk to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to lose that one-on-one connection to say, oh, I don't think we're going to get resolution here, but can I still respond in a loving way? Because it's going to tax you. It does tax you to yell. It takes an enormous amount of energy to kind of let loose. And that's why people be tired and exhausted
Mm-hmm.
after dealing with like
Yeah.
drama. I was gonna say trauma, but drama.
They can be synonymous sometimes. I hear you. And even on the opposite end, they're both taxing, right? So, because I hear you saying like assertive communication, right? Like that's what you're modeling in this moment. But what we notice with relational trauma is either people are yelling, being aggressive, like whatever this is, or they're shut down. Like I'm just not gonna say anything, right? Okay, I'm gonna just let this go. And
Yeah.
they're having this whole internal process, shutting down, freezing, and not asserting themselves and allowing like their voice to be heard, allowing energy to move through so that they're not sitting with it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, both ends, I see that often.
Yeah. And for folks who, when we're talking about these extremes for therapists, we sometimes look at attachment styles. That goes back to childhood around how you connect to other people. And there's 4 styles that tend to be very common. And they're not perfect, but sometimes people identify with one more than the other. And the secure attachment is the one that everyone wants to be able to experience. Like, I can experience love and give it. I have low anxiety in my relationships. and high
Yes.
confidence and,
Mm,
my ability to connect. Um, Secure attachment is the ideal way
yeah.
because it's less of the funky emotions. Not to say
Right.
that you won't ever have any, but overall you can manage really well. Like, I don't need you to call me every single day.
No.
I don't need you to message me first thing in the morning. Uh,
Yeah.
but there may be some things to say, well, they must have been working.
Right. There's trust there, right? That's what I hear you saying, like a lot of trust, right?
Yeah,
Um, they're if they don't pick up their phone, you trust that they probably are busy. Maybe they're taking a shower, maybe they're asleep, maybe they're working. It doesn't mean anything else than that. They just were not by their phone. Maybe they needed space to just kind of be to themselves,
right.
right? But there's trust in knowing that that attachment is stable, it's secure, and we are good even when you're not immediately available to me.
Right. But also that trust extends to yourself, that if you are in partnership or in friendship or familyship, that if you're giving a certain amount and not receiving and not getting the clues, that you can trust to switch gears, to say,
Mm-hmm.
well, my needs aren't getting met here. I'm not
Mm,
going to belabor you. I'm not going to shame you or guilt you. I'm going to make some different choices for myself.
yes, that's so good. That's
It's
so good.
very different than like, you didn't do this. I see that you cannot provide what I've been looking for. I see that you don't have the capacity, and sometimes not even a conversation with the other person. It's just a choice you make, right?
Yeah.
Part of
Yeah.
boundaries with in traumatic relationships, there tends to be poor boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
They never knew they couldn't talk to you like that. They never knew you not going to respond to text messages at 11 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
because you've been responding to messages at 12 a.m.
Yes. 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 For sure. And I also hear you highlighting like empowerment, right? Like I'm going to empower myself to make different choices based on the information in front of me.
Yeah,
Like I can take a moment, I can take a pause, assess the situation, and also empower myself to shift.
yeah,
Whether that's like an internal shift and I decide to move differently or even communicate, right? But when we think about relational trauma and childhood trauma, a lot of children, at least historically, don't have a voice in the family, right? Like you stay in a child's place, you don't get to say anything or push back,
yeah,
right? That's not an option.
yeah,
So then as we grow up as adults, then we still don't have that voice and people are expected to use it and it's like well we haven't even practiced and there might even be a block there like I
yeah.
want to do this but in my body it gets stuck,
It won't come out.
it won't come
I
out.
remember as a kid too, and there are limits around that, right? Around
Hmm.
using respectful language.
For sure.
I think that's part of it. You can't talk to me a certain way,
No.
and you're gonna have to manage your emotions, but not giving alternatives of what you can do. So that person who's constantly suppressed, even if they're right, because sometimes kids are right.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Mhm.
have an example that happened on Monday with my son. And we teach practicing voices in our house with respect, right? We don't tolerate disrespect. Our values are respect, but we also want to give them a voice. And he was right and I was wrong. I told him, like, he was speaking up for something. I'm like, no, that's not right or whatever. And he was like, well, mommy, you weren't there. I'm like, and I'm like, but I think I know. He's like, nope, you weren't there. And I'm like, okay. So I just left it at that. And I went home and I talked to my husband. He was like, nope, David was right. I was like, oh, so I had to go back and apologize. You were right. I was wrong. My bad. Right.
Yeah,
But just having him to stand in his truth.
yeah,
Like he said it so respectfully, like, nope, mommy, you weren't there. You didn't see it. Like, I'm just gonna remind you, this is what I know to be true.
yeah.
So
As a kid, I was very assertive, and my mom knew that that may not go well outside the house.
mm-hmm,
You got any issues with adults? I don't want you to go back and forth with them. Tell me. So
mm-hmm,
trust that I can go to my mom and tell her, that teacher's been making me feel uncomfortable and they're harassing me and they're giving me a bad grade and it's not fair. I can give all that to my mom and she would advocate for me.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that you can certainly model for children to say there is a right and wrong way to communicate your
Yeah,
need, you
for
know,
sure. For
because if
sure.
I was to just be, giving the teacher my full
Mm-hmm.
my full gusto,
Right.
then I would look like the unruly child.